I'm doing well, Kevin. Yeah, man. Put the Christmas tree up early this year. One of
Yeah.
our former guests accused me of heresy on that maneuver. Ken Apple. I don't know if you
Oh
remember
yeah.
that conversation we
Yeah. Oh
had,
yeah.
but I told him to sue me and that it's a holly jolly Christmas around beef parts. Um, you know, rules are only rules until they are not. That's a rule.
That's
Uh,
very true.
World is what you make it. So, yeah, man, beautiful day here in Florida. Getting cold across the country,
Cold here.
Oh yeah.
but maybe the markets are heating up a little bit. I know folks have called bottom and starting to see a little bit of that in the data as well. But I don't know, that's what I'm thinking about, anyways, Kev.
Yeah, we got a good friend here who is plugged into the media, the news of the industry, Mr. Thomas Werdine over at ThinkFreight. He was our first guest on Dude, What's the Bid? And now he's our 28th guest too, or 29th. I forget. I lose count sometimes.
What's going on, guys? You guys thinking freight today?
Always thinking freight.
Yeah.
Cold, hot, in between. It's all freight.
It's a great time to be thinking freight. There's a lot of movement. We're hearing that the freight recession may be over. There's a lot of data. Uber's caused some controversy, and maybe we'll dive into that a little bit. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of fun stuff if you're in freight logistics.
For sure. It's kind of like that. Remember that meme that was going around the internet, Kev? The Roman Empire. You know, wives asking their husbands, how often are you thinking about the Roman Empire? Every time I'm in the bathroom, I think about the Roman Empire. Freight kind of does have that effect on folks that do get touched by it.
It is. It's not really being not touched by an angel. It's touched by freight, I suppose, right? This the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, no, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot that's happened in 2024. A lot of different positioning. You know, there's the CDL issues, and Thomas, you've been tracking it all. Give us the big story that you're really glued in on and following right now.
Yeah, I think the two biggest ones are obviously, Craig called the end of the freight recession about 10 days or so now. That's kind of the big one. And I've been talking to a lot of both brokerages and asset-based guys the last 10 or so days. And, it depends on where they're moving freight from, but they're definitely starting to see some movement, especially on the West Coast. I've heard like Arizona, California, Nevada have really heated up, and those rates are starting to go through the roof and capacity starting to tighten up. So, we might be at, kind of a, maybe near bottom or on our trajectory back up. The data is kind of showing that. Now, that's not, exactly what other companies are hearing. Ryder and TD Cohen both don't agree that we're at the bottom. They think there's still some time in 2025 that, that we're going to see a lot of, tribulation throughout the industry. But, we're going to kind of see as the next, few months go on. We've seen a kind of influx of volumes coming in with the potential of Chinese tariffs going up to 60% under a new Trump administration. So there's a lot of movement in the industry right now. That's the kind of the biggest one I'm tracking. And then obviously the ILA strike, which could be a potential coming up in January, right before Trump is inaugurated. And then obviously the CDL downgrades that happened on Monday, affecting nearly, about 200,000 drivers. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
For sure. Yeah. Sorry, Kev.
Oh no, go ahead.
Just gonna say, it's funny. I was going back and forth with Ken Damo yesterday from DAT on Twitter. He was asking folks to, make their best guess what you should pay for a truck in Chicago to Atlanta market right now. So I went and checked the rate. Looks like 1,900 was the answer there based on the carrier purchased invoice data we have over here. I went and checked it again today.
It's going up.
It's getting hot. there in that dry van market? I know it's a little anecdotal, but
well, Chicago's a big rail hub too, right? So anything that's coming out of LA over the West Coast is going to make its way probably to Chicago to be in that Midwest, and then to make its way south into the East Coast. So yeah, seeing Chicago market heat up as well as the LA markets, it kind of follows the normal trend as to when those kind of markets start to heat up. So as we start to see that, yeah, that's good to see that over the last 24, 48 hours, we're already seeing that shift of rates going up in that Chicago market again.
Right, for sure. And I don't know, Kev, how you feel about this, but I'd love to dive into your experience as a freight broker, right? Like,
yeah,
you started at TQL. I think I saw a post of yours, I think in the last week or so. Holy shit, when I joined the industry as a broker for TQL, I didn't necessarily see myself starting a media company and helping folks think a little bit more about freight. I know you're down in Texas these days, but where are you from, man? How'd you get your start in logistics? Where'd you go to school? How'd you fall in love with the industry?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So I'll kind of go a little bit further back. So my grandparents had a about 100-year-old fuel and petroleum business when I was a child, and I grew up with my grandparents for most of my adolescence, through my teenage years, and I just kind of was just around that industry. I was around box trucks. I was around the movement of that all the time, scheduling. My grandparents scheduling refinery pickups, the drivers going in and out. They had a crew of about 10 at their height when I was alive, and then towards when I got into my teens, it was about 5 people. But they were delivering to gas stations, construction sites. So I kind of got into it really early, but I saw the 24/7 nature of it. I saw the stressfulness of it. Yeah. And I just didn't want any part of it when I was younger. Even though I helped my grandparents and did like small things and the kind of normal kid things when you have entrepreneurs as your role models and who you grow up around. But I never really wanted to be in that side of the industry. Just something about it wasn't what I wanted. And as I grew up through high school, I really tried to figure out what that next path was, and I didn't want to go to college right off the bat, so I started selling cars. And I really cut my teeth in sales in the auto industry for the first 2.5, 3 years, 4 years. And I was I moved up from being just on the sales floor selling cars to being a Corvette specialist, from Corvette specialist to being an inventory manager, from inventory manager to leaving the store to going to do finance for motorcycles and ATVs, and then back to car dealerships to do finance for them. And I'll be frank, I just started to get burnt out of the automotive side of it. As much fun as I had over those years, and getting to go to Vegas and drive unreleased Corvettes and test drive them against Porsches and Vipers and things like that. It's a fun time, but kind of like in logistics, I was working a ton of hours, and unfortunately, I just didn't feel the fulfillment in the auto industry. And I got kind of headhunted to go to TQL. They kind of had reached out. My resume was online, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come be a freight broker?" And I was like, "What the hell's a freight broker? Like, what do they do?" So they kind of gave me the 411 of it, and it kind of sounded like what it kind of was in line of what my grandparents had done, and kind of like it felt like more of the dispatching side is kind of what I felt like before I really got into it. I accepted the offer, and quickly was very in over my head, and was like, holy crap, like, what did I sign up to do? I don't think this is for me. And I was, my first couple of weeks of training, TQL's training is pretty in depth. My first couple of weeks, I was pretty like adamant that I wasn't going to stay very long, like maybe a few months until I found something else. But I quickly really started to like it. When I started to take carrier calls, when I started to listen to that aspect, when I started to sell loads, when I started to dive into some of those problems of the in and outs of each load, and kind of learning kind of that process of what happens, it was really interesting. And I didn't want to get into anything else. There were so many things that I could do, and so many aspects and ways I could go with it. I was like, wow, this is way more than I expected it to be. Um, so yeah, I stuck it out. I was with TQL for almost 2.5, almost 2 years. Like you said, my post I made was right about my 7-year anniversary from when I got my first commission check. So TQL has a 6-month training period, and I was about 2 months into being a full-time LAE, a full-time logistics account executive, full-time broker, for those in other areas. And I was absolutely hooked. Like, I was about 8 months into TQL, and I just didn't want that. Like,
Right.
I never wanted that to end. Right. Like, it felt so fun. And then I started to like have other friends. Go ahead.
What does that training class look like at TQL? It's interesting. You're a Corvette salesman, and then they hire you to come into TQL. TQL obviously has like some, there's a brand there, right? People feel a certain way about them on social. They've grown like a weed. They do very well. How many folks were in your training class? What was that training program like? What were you doing on the daily? How do they create monsters over there?
Yeah. So the training class was, I want to say 14 to 17 people, somewhere right in there. First day is pretty interesting. You kind of come in and they've got, donuts and coffee and all that stuff. And you kind of come in later than the normal time. You generally start at 7, but I think they start the training class at like 9 the first day. And you meet everyone and kind of get into like kind of like what you would expect, a training kind of room, a conference room with a bunch of desks and computers, and a bunch of the sales managers will come in and talk and welcome us to what we're about to dive into. And the first 2 weeks is really a lot of computer modules, a lot of computer training. Half of your day is spent on the floor, kind of with your mentor and kind of the outgoing trainee who's going on to be a broker. So you're spending about a half of your time on the floor with them and kind of learning, but also half the time learning compliance and check calls and what all these terms are, and taking quizzes on the computer and modules. And then after that 2 weeks, you really dove in more to the logistics aspect, the actual making check calls, and you get a taste of that in your first 2 weeks. I made probably a handful of check calls and booked a couple of loads and things like that. But you really start to dive into it week 2, week 3, week 4, because by that first month, after your 4 weeks, that other broker, the other trainee, is off the account completely. So you may have them to reference and ask questions and things like that, but they're off the account. You're the new trainee if there's only one. So you're kind of helping run the entire show at this point. And it's just I think the training is really solid because you really dive into having to own your mentor's book of business. At least that's what I did. I had a really good mentor who really taught me how to treat both carriers and your shipper side exactly the same, because you need them as a non-asset based broker. I need my carriers just as much as I need my shippers, because I can't move freight from my desk. So I had a really good mentor, and that training is basically ongoing with your mentor, with other salespeople, other people within your group. And you do a lot of private or by yourself prospecting, and they give you a lot of hands off time to be able to just go and make calls away from your account. Your broker's not supposed to bother you during this maybe hour a week that you have to just go and make cold calls. And then obviously when the account is slow, you're also doing the same thing. You're making cold calls, you're helping other brokers, you're kind of making sure load coverage is there, so you really understand kind of those ins and outs of being a broker. And then they also make you do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. You have to stay several nights in a row where you're doing after hours to understand what that after hours process is like, and why that those after hour agents are reaching out to you when when they are. So you can understand, okay, this is kind of that behind the scenes process and why they would be reaching out to me. When I first heard about that, I was like, why do I have to shadow this? It's kind of stupid. It's whatever it is. But, I quickly realized, wow, there can be a lot of behind the scenes problems, a lot of after hours problems, especially if you're dealing with late shippers or produce. There can be a ton of problems that you can run into. And I quickly found out. Yeah, man, I moved a ton of produce and I quickly found out I loved it, but I also hated it because those 2 a.m. phone calls get really tiring. So I just learned a lot of
a lot of pickups and deliveries happen after 5 o'clock, right?
Oh yeah, tons. I mean, especially in the produce side, most of those are happening 7 p.m. to 4 o'clock in the morning usually.
Yeah. So I mean TQL. I mean, like one thing that you always hear is their training. Their training is spot on. It's very structured. And you see it the same style, right? All the alumni that I know that started TQL, they kind of all have the same style. So it's very uniform, and it works to scale, I suppose, right? I mean, that's how you scale up. It's like you have one philosophy of a sales style and operational style, and you roll that out to everyone to conform to that. Because there's 6, 7, 8 that I can think of off the top of my hand. And there's that similarity between all of them, and it's cool to see.
Yeah, no, and they've got, like I said, like it's just such an in-depth program, and then once you go out on your own, you're held accountable, right? You're not okay, you're on your own and that's it. You have to get through a proving grounds period, which I believe is 8 weeks, and they've got a GP threshold where if you don't hit it or you're not close to it, you're not going to be staying with the company unless that's in more of a load. Unless you're really good at covering loads and things like that, they might find an LC position, a coordinator position for you. But a lot of times brokers just don't last if they don't hit their numbers in that first 2 months being a broker. So it's very cutthroat, but the best of the best survive, and that's what they want. They want the ones who can really go out there and find the diamonds in the rough and the freight that has been TQLs in the past, and it's been lost, and go out there and regain it. So they have a pretty good model. Obviously, they get a lot of flack on social media, but the numbers kind of speak for themselves. They're the largest private brokerage, and I think the second largest in all of them. So.
Yeah, second largest around, I think 8,000 or 9,000 employees. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's a lot. It's a lot of people moving freight. They have offices everywhere. Cincinnati is kind of what they're known for, but they have offices over there, and Ken Oaks is the richest man in Cincinnati. Yep. So I mean, I guess that says a lot. Cincinnati is kind of an old money, old school type of city, right? So to have a freight broker as the richest person in Cincinnati is strange.
Yeah, and they're putting their name on everything, right? They have TQL Stadium. They've got they've got their big offices. I mean, TQL is very well known in that community, whether you love them or hate them.
They are very well known. That they are. What did you do after TQL?
Yeah, so after TQL, so I was getting ready. I knew I was going to move to. So I was at TQL in Chicago. I knew I was going to move to Houston. So I kind of preemptively left TQL around December or January, right before I moved to Houston. We moved in May and started to wait out my non-compete. I knew I wanted to stay in logistics, but wasn't going to really mess with any kind of non-compete issues that I had with TQL. So I got down to Houston and kind of waited out, got through that period a little bit. Did a little bit of work contract wise with a parcel mom and pop company that was trying to figure out some logistics issues they were having. Nothing that TQL could have ever, no business that they could have ever had or anything like that. So I felt pretty comfortable taking that on for a few months on the contract side. And then a friend of mine started a brokerage and was basically like, hey, do you want to come be employee number one? And this was right before COVID started to hit, and we started the brokerage and started to scale pretty quickly. A lot of new business we acquired pretty quick. It was just kind of a ripe time right before COVID, and then COVID hit. Things were kind of uncertain. We got a lot of shippers that told us no. We're kind of waiting to figure out what's going on with COVID. We're not switching providers right now. We don't want anyone who doesn't know our stuff, blah, blah, blah. So we were kind of in a pretty interesting time for a couple of months. And then we kind of found some good footing with a couple of produce shippers that needed some help. And we had some capacity out of California. And it just worked out that we were able to push that really hard. And that opened doors in other areas, and it just kind of blossomed from there. And we were, I was there for about 2 years, and we were scaling pretty pretty quickly. And that's kind of when I got, right after that, I got headhunted to go to FreightWaves to go sell sonar.
Interesting.
And when did you come over to the sonar team? It was,
I think, around September, October 2021-ish, mid 2021.
All right.
So really
when
hot
did you
time.
When did you make the move from Chicago down to Houston?
So I made the move right around May of 2019 is when we moved down here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a good time.
A little bit warmer.
Oh yeah, much warmer. I'm, still reaping the benefits of that today because it's, it's cold in Chicago right now, but it's 70 degrees in Houston today.
Can't beat that.
No, you cannot.
Cannot at all. So cool. And then ThinkFreight.
Yeah.
Which you've been doing. How long? 2 years
like
now,
what?
or?
Yeah, just about 2 years. May of or March of 2023 is when we started. So it's coming up on 2 years.
Very cool. What made you get out of the super fast growing brokerage after 2 years scaling? Your employee number 2 just had enough of slinging freight and wanted to get into sonar sales to give other brokers like yourself tools that you thought would help them be successful? Or
yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, it came up at a really interesting time, the opportunity to go to FreightWaves. I was excited for the opportunity to stay in brokerage, but I'll be frank, I was just very burned out. From TQL.
No.
Yeah,
No,
from
you
TQL.
can't get burnt out at brokerage.
You're right. You're right. It's the number one rule. You can't. No burnout in brokerage.
That is a myth that is spread over. No.
Yeah, I just got burnt out, man. And that time through COVID was just so busy. And like I said, we were moving a lot of produce at the time. And as we opened with, produce is a pain in the ass. I was getting a lot of 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. calls, lumper calls. And when you're one of several people who can do something on those calls, you've got to take them, and you're lacking or giving up some sleep. I mean, there was times where I'd get a call at 3 a.m. and I was just up for the day, and then I'd go to bed at 8 p.m. and I'd get another call that night at midnight, and I was probably get another couple hours of sleep and be up at 3 a.m. again. So it was just I just didn't get a lot of sleep. I was burnt out. The opportunity at FreightWaves arose to come do some sonar stuff, and FreightWaves was in a really good position at the time. And I was like, wow, this seems like a really good opportunity with them having a media side and having a tech. The two sides seemed like it was a really smart play in my opinion. And so I was just excited to come try something new. Technology has always been something I enjoy. So being able to stay and use my knowledge and still be able to talk to freight brokers, still be able to talk to carriers, still be able to talk to the shipper side was something I was really excited about when I came to FreightWaves.
Do you like selling to brokers more or being a broker?
I think selling to brokers more. For sure.
And it helps since if you're a broker, right? It helps you selling to brokers because you understand you understand what's going on, you understand what needs to be fixed, and either you have a solution for that or you don't, and you pretty clearly understand if you do or don't much more clearly. So it's always interesting, going from one profession and then selling to that. So you're basically selling inside, and whenever you can do that, you're usually always successful because of that empathy that you naturally have for your prospecting. You've walked a mile or two or three in their shoes, and you've gotten those calls at 3. What's your major, from your brokerage days? What's your major disaster story? Right, the load from hell.
Oh, yeah. So we had a load of garlic picking up out of California going to Orlando, and we had a truck booked. This is like peak COVID. Rates were anywhere from like $8,800 to $12,000 for California to Orlando, and we had a regular guy booked at like $9,000, $9,200, and we had, I think, 10K, 10.2 in the loads. We made $800 or $1,000 on it. Sorry to all the carriers listening that are going to get up in arms, but it's a $10,000 deal. I mean, we've got to make something. That's 10%. So, you'll be happy at the end of this, I promise, carriers. So we get to the day of pickup. It's like a Thursday pickup, supposed to deliver them by Wednesday. Has to be there by Wednesday. And the carrier calls me. He's like, "Hey man, I'm broken down 7 miles from the facility. I'm trying to get one of my other drivers to go pick this up." He's like, "But I don't have any other company drivers. I have 3 owner operators who want 9,000 or 9,700, 10,500 or 12,000 to take it." So I said, "Hey, let me just call."
Finish the last 7 miles?
No, to pick it up, and then so they're still like weren't at the shipper. So this was a company driver that they had on the load, so they could take it at a little bit different rate. But the owner operators, he had 3 other guys in the area that could have done it, but they wanted significantly more. So I said, "Give me like 20 minutes. Let me call one of our other regulars who generally takes these." And so no one else was available. We ended up booking the guy, I think, at like 9,400, 9,500. We got him out too. And what happened was, so he got loaded. He gets loaded in California. Takes him 2-ish hours. They're loading bulk garlic, so it's not all trailer loaded, but it's just tons of bins of raw garlic on pallets. And so he's loaded with all this, and he's supposed to be loaded with 42-ish thousand pounds, 40-ish 1,000 pounds. He gets to a scale house like 40 miles down the road. He's loaded up with 57,000 pounds of garlic.
Oh, shit.
This is like now 10 p.m., 11 p.m. He's 50 miles away. I call the shipper. They're not answering. So I can call my contact. She's not answering. He goes back to the shipper and he's like, "Hey, no one's here." So he's like, "I gotta wait. I'm not gonna run it."
Mm-hmm.
So he waits overnight, and then the shipper gets there and they're like really oddly confused. Like, rightly so. The truck left at 11 o'clock at night. He's back here. So they start like trying to see what's going on. The driver's all pissed off because he's had to wait. He's an owner operator, so like this isn't with the company. Like it is with the company, but he's an owner operator for the company.
Yeah.
So he starts talking. He's never run these garlic loads before. He starts kind of being a little shitty with the shipper, and the shipper didn't like that, and they said, "Hey, we're gonna unload this guy. Find us another truck. We're just not gonna let this guy come in here." Well, we didn't have any other options. We posted it on DAT, and this guy called us and said, "Hey, I'll run this." We had no other options. Friday morning, has to get there by Wednesday. Shipper obviously understands now. Like, they understand, like, hey, like if it gets there late Wednesday, it's fine. Well, this guy called us. He's like, "Hey, I'll run it for 12 grand." We give him the first option. He's 12 grand. He gets there. He loads it. They load the proper amount of garlic. He gets rolling. He gets all the way into Texas. It's like Saturday night. It's probably Sunday at some point. His truck breaks down. It's not really his truck that's broken down. It's his reefer that's broken down. He calls me and says, "Hey, the garlic's supposed to run at like 50 degrees, 40 degrees. I think it's 40 degrees. He's like, hey, my reefer's at like 55 right now. I said, oh crap. I said, you need to get it like ASAP. I'll call the shipper. They were panicking. They had temp tallies in there, so they were checking it, and I'm not sure if his reefer was like the temp was broken or whatever. But long story short, it half the load ended up like going bad in the like one half of the trailer. He was adamant that everything was okay in the first. It became such a nightmare. We had reefer downloads. It was claim issue after claim issue. Yeah, it was a fun time. So, and he got to the shipper, and they were unloading it, and he's looking. I mean, this garlic is like gone bad, like super quick. And I don't know if it was genuinely, if it was just like a product that they just that they loaded on that wasn't as quality as it should have been. I don't know if his reefer was really having his. I mean, it was about 8 degrees, 10 degrees higher by the time it got there. It shouldn't have, like, the spoilage that happened was pretty unique, and like we were pretty shocked that like within 3 days that this amount of spoilage would happen. But you never know with these reefers, man, or what product gets loaded. And it was a headache to even like once they started to process the claim, it was a headache, and we had the USDA involved, and yeah, it was just a lot of fun, man. I don't miss produce.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you don't really talk about, and I didn't even remember until you got into your story, is that a few different things, right? But overloading being number one of them. That's the reason why I wouldn't work with any wood, like raw wood or lumber, because they always overload.
Always.
Right? Bad customers, right? But then you're in the middle, right? You're basically inserted into the middle of sometimes conflict between buyer and seller.
Yep.
Shipper and consignee, right? And what they might, they might be wanting to offload some bad product.
Oh yeah.
And it shows up, and it becomes your headache, because of certain things like that. Things don't show up, right? There's anomalies in this or that, or you don't deliver on time, but there's a time or a date that shows up after the fact, and they're contesting. They might have lawsuits running against it. You never know, right?
Exactly.
And you get sucked into the middle of it, and that's never fun.
No, it's not a good time.
No, it's really not. It's really not. But yeah, the overloading thing. Yeah, I think again with brokerage, you have to fire clients. I think that's one of the big lessons that I learned as my days as a broker. There are shitty customers.
Oh yeah.
And you have to steer away from them, because they are going to cost you your time, money, sanity, sleep, and it's just not worth the squeeze. And you just have to have the courage as an organization as well to say, get these people away from me.
Yeah, that's what we had to do, because the shipper. I mean, they gave us a lot of volume, and we moved a lot of product for them. But then it became not just pickup issues, delivery issues, and transit issues. Then it became 45 days to get things paid, 60 days to get things paid, 100 days to get things paid. And we're a small growing brokerage, so that's really we're paying $10,000 invoices. So 60 days is really, really a tight squeeze if we're quick paying people. So yeah, it got tough. We fired the client pretty quickly, honestly, after probably 90 to 120 days of moving pretty consistent loads, and then them's just not paying. Like, we had invoices at 120 days. Our first loads were not paid, like 4 months in. So it was like, we were just like, this is not even worth our headache anymore.
And it's usually the customers, right, who do that are the ones who are so price sensitive. And
the hardest to sell.
The hardest to sell, right? The hardest to maintain, because they're high maintenance for a number of those reasons and others. Yeah. And you make the least amount of margin on them.
Yeah, that's
and you take all those data points, right? And you're like, get away. And the quicker you say get away, or fire them, the better off you're going to be in the long run. Because as an individual broker, right, that can eat up all your time. So you're not bringing in any new business.
Oh yeah.
Things are falling through the cracks on your other customers because you're devoting so much time, and you can't scale that whatsoever, right? You can't get to the position you want to be.
And that's exactly what happened. I was spending so much time with this customer thinking, okay, if I can make 10% on a load, that's $1,000, which is great. But then I would make one or two of those on a Monday or Tuesday. And then Wednesday or Thursday, I've clawed, $4,000 back because I've had fall offs and paid a guy 12 grand a truck, and we've lost, 2K a load now. So instead of spending my time making, $200 a load, $300 a load with consistent, plastic freight that I also had, or consistent, OD for, or not OD freight, but step deck and flatbed freight. I was chasing my wheels on this, where I could have moved 5 loads of plastic and made the same amount of money and not had these major problems and issues. So it's just kind of learning about organizationally, especially as a small brokerage, what kind of risk you're really willing to take in your business. And also, I was talking with a podcast guest earlier today, but it just comes down to kind of that shipper portfolio risk you're willing to take. How much risk are you willing to put into one shipper? Are you willing to have a $500 or $1 million exposure at 120 days? Is that worth it as a brokerage? Maybe not, especially as a small brokerage. But if you're a TQL size brokerage, maybe that's a risk they're willing to take. But as a smaller scaling brokerage, you've got to just kind of weigh all those options and figure out what is best for you and where you can scale the most and have kind of that shipper diversity.
I think it applies in a lot of different industries, right? Like, cut your losers, bet on your winners, 80-20 rule, hire slow, fire fast. The easier you can make your customers to work with, the easier you can solve problems for them, right? Who knows, maybe you'd still be a freight broker, Tommy, if you could ever find a way out of produce. But glad that
I might have been, man. If I was just working dry van freight consistently, I might have stayed a little bit longer. But hey, what's interesting is even the dry van freight that I found was still problematic stuff, or even the power only stuff I would find was still, like, I couldn't shy away from the non-problematic freight. It just found me. When it was power only stuff, it was round trips where they're 24-hour pickups, and I'm getting calls. It's still 2:00 in the morning. Hey, I can't find the trailer. And, it's those kind of headaches. So I still found those same kind of problems. If I could have found some non-problematic dry van freight that made me, a good GP a month, I would have stayed forever.
Right.
I don't know if does that exist.
I don't think so. No.
In a perfect world, right? Power only. We had a client that we used to pass around the office. You show up, the gate's locked. There's no way for the truck to get into the gate, right? And you can't get a hold of this shipper. Sometimes the tire's flat, or the trailer's just not inspection level,
right?
Has,
not roadworthy,
expired, not road ready. But we kept them around, right? And for whatever reason, and we just passed it around. Whoever came in new. That's
a training.
It's like, here you go. It is. It really is. It's a training client. Here's what can go wrong. Go have fun with it.
Yep.
And it was good like that. So let's go back to market, because I've been hearing about this, and I've kind of looked at it. I know that you've been keeping tabs on it pretty closely. It's the CDL, the 180,000 or so CDLs. Please explain a little bit further, for our audience, for myself, what exactly that means, and then we can talk about the impacts to the market.
Yeah. So the FMCSA put, some new rules. We have what's called Clearinghouse 2, which took effect on Monday. It basically revokes or puts the CDL status into prohibited status if these drivers have either drug or alcohol related, I believe, out of service orders or status, in their record basically. And if it's something that hasn't been taken care of, they haven't gone through if they haven't gone through the resolution process, the return to duty status, then they were downgraded until that return to duty status or test was taken. Now that was set to impact roughly about 187,000 drivers. And I believe going into Monday, around either 87 or 100,000 drivers had not done the RTD process. So that capacity could have, gone offline starting Monday. So that, as we're starting to see some of these, Casey was looking at Chicago to Atlanta a few minutes ago. That could also be some of that correlation with drivers being taken off the road for this clearinghouse 2 rule. We're not really sure how many were taken offline yet, but I'm sure that those numbers will become available pretty soon.
Now, is that a permanent taking offline, right? So they're just prohibited from having it CDL basically ever again?
No, so it's just it's a temporary until they complete that RTD, the return to duty status or test, basically. So they have to go through basically an education process, show it like a treatment process that they're not abusing drugs or alcohol, and then a test. So then and that's not I don't believe that that's like a very fast process to do either. It's not something where on Monday they were downgraded and by today they're going to be able to go back to status. I think it takes a little bit of time to do so.
So here's my question about that: is that the Drug and Clearinghouse has been Drug Clearinghouse 4 years now, 5 years now?
Wait, so 5 years?
It's somewhere around there, right? 2019, maybe it was 2020. But 2019, because we talked a lot about it at FreightWaves, and that would probably have been 2019 because we were looking for anything that could limit capacity, right? In Drug Clearinghouse. So are they just now getting around to actually enforcing any penalties on the people whose names have entered the Drug Clearinghouse?
And I think so, yeah.
That might take a process. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it. That's about what I understand is, it's just, this is kind of that, I just looked it up. It looked like it took place January of 2020. So yeah, this is kind of that first step in actually enforcing that rule now.
So so it only took 5 years, which is kind of speedy for the FMCSA, right?
Yeah, exactly.
5 years, maybe enforce it at that point. I tell you what, here's the wild card, right? Because how many of those was 180,000?
Yeah, about 187. Right? Yeah,
187,000. How many are those CDLs, or how many of those drivers, right, are actually still driving?
That's fair.
Today, right? Yeah. Is it, because that's not really answered in that, right?
Right.
Say 50% have already exited because they probably can't get a job because something happened that they because it's employment screening. It's still being used for employment screening. So let's say it could be 50%, it could be 95%, theoretically, right? No one really knows, and I haven't heard a good number for that. So this has the ability to really be significant or not be significant whatsoever, right?
Right.
Okay. Not to be a downer, right? Not to be the total perma bull or perma bear that I am, but I'll do that here.
Well, I guess it kind of depends on
what aspect. Question, at least.
I think it depends on what area you're looking at, right? Like if you're a carrier, it's probably not the best if you're one of these drivers who are being downgraded. But if you're a driver who's saying, hey, rates really suck and we need rates to go up, if this impacts more drivers, this takes capacity offline, and that makes rates go higher. So on a driver side or a carrier side, they may want this to kind of happen, take some capacity offline, but on the broker perspective, obviously, in the shipper perspective, they don't want this to happen because it will take capacity offline. It will drive rates up. It will be harder to cover freight. It will be tougher to gain market share. So there are kind of those pros and cons depending on what angle of the market you're kind of seeing things from.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. What angle you are. So it's interesting to see what will come down the pipe. And how quickly that anything happens just because they're at risk, I suppose. As well, there's a lot of moving parts in that. But that is one question that I've been seeing this headline over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and that's really the one question I had about it, is that I wonder how many of these, because there's a lot of active CDLs out there just naturally, right, that aren't being used. So whenever you're trying to get carrier counts, right, or capacity, which I was always trying to do at certain points, you look at a CDL, you have the nightmare of those are state issues. So you have to go to every state to get CDL numbers. But there's a lot of, I have like probably 5 relatives that have a CDL license, but they're not driving a truck. They're not driving anything. It's that they've had a job in the past kind of that they needed a CDL. And it's usually a service truck, right? Or, a service van, something that is over whatever the weight limit is. I forget. So you can't really count those as drivers too, right? So, I mean, there's just no good way to cut through the noise.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm not sure we'll ever kind of know those official numbers as to how many of those drivers that were actually drivers and not just CDL holders that are no longer actually driving or in the workforce, the trucking workforce. Not sure we'll actually see those, but it is definitely an interesting question, and would be, if we ever see that data, would love to dive into that.
Yeah, I would too. So that's one big storyline out there. What's another one that you're tracking, keep your eye out, that you find fascinating, because that's what we want to hear about?
Yeah, this Uber Freight and broker access, I think, has been a topic that's been on everyone's mind on social media. They unveiled this carrier capacity network similar to like a Convoy 2.0, where brokers can go and post their loads and use Uber Freight's network of capacity. And it's been pretty controversial. People like Andrew Silver blatantly called it double brokering. People like Kyle Graves, who said it's definitely not double brokering. Matt Leffler, the armchair attorney, called it Convoy 2.0. So it's an interesting topic, right? I think that the double brokering aspect gets a lot of gets a lot of headlines right now, but I can see both angles where this can definitely turn into a double brokering over a co-brokering situation. Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially if your shippers aren't aware that you're going to be putting this onto Uber Freight's network. In my opinion, if you're not telling them, hey, we're going to use a co-broker in this situation, that's double brokering. But if you're being transparent and saying, hey, we're going to open this up to another network that we utilize, as long as you're being transparent and the shipper's okay with it, I don't see any problem with it.
All the differences are interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of terms out there that you have double brokering, right? You have co-brokering, right? Which is, I go back to the old Landstar, my brokering days in Landstar, right? We co-brokered with Landstar because Landstar had assets and they're going to get us, we're going to put it on a Landstar truck, right? But we knew they weren't going to put it on a truck. And they knew that they wasn't going to put it on a truck, and the customer knew as well, right? I mean, we all knew, because their agents are incentivized to that they get a bigger rip or bigger margin, bigger commission if they book third-party assets and not Landstar contracted drivers in a lot of ways, right? They make less, more reliable and things, but you have that. So those co-brokering, but the difference between double brokering, co-brokering is knowledge and a little bit, right? The communication, transparency almost, right? Is like, if you're kind of transparent about it, you're co-brokering, right? And it makes sense to co-broker sometimes, right? It's just like, I'm going to offload this to someone who has a better network. Which is kind of like Uber's play, but and then you have double brokering, which is where there's no transparency and you're trying to be a little sly on the side, right? And so, and then you have Convoy's doing, which is a little bit different, right? You
Right.
have direct, you're still in control, right? You have direct access to their capacity. So it's almost just like procurement in a lot of ways. I think they handle a few other things operationally that you traditionally would have to do,
Right.
but they're going to handle it. But you're still in charge of the load, right? You're
Yep.
still, your rate confirmation is going to the truck. Whereas in Uber's model, your rate confirmation isn't going to the truck. Yours is going to Uber, which is almost like managed trans in a
Yep.
lot of ways, right? So managed trans falls within co-brokering and double brokering, but there's that Chinese wall, that firewall between the managed trans department and the brokers department and 4PL, or it should be there, right?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because they do have Transplace. They bought Transplace, and that's what Transplace essentially does, is that managed trans aspect. So it's interesting that they're kind of bringing that into, it's interesting, yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that they're bringing that model right into their main business and saying, hey, maybe we'll move away from the traditional freight brokerage model and turn everything into a 4PL where we're kind of helping with capacity and kind of moving away from the traditional freight broker model. I don't know. I think that, like you said, there's a lot of interesting, terms and words that can be used here. But I think the biggest thing is it's just, as a freight broker, and Samantha Jones said this on Andrew's post, was, as a broker, if your ability to bring in capacity as a broker isn't there, what is your role, right? If you can't bring that new capacity in, why wouldn't the shipper just go direct to Uber Freight and post their load there or utilize them? So I think that that's an interesting, I think that there's ways.
If you join this network, right? I mean, are you putting yourself out of business? Are you giving Uber that business at the end of the day? I guess is something that I'm
potentially in the future, maybe.
Potentially, and then you look at it this way, right? So devil's advocate or different viewpoint, whatever, right? Different business model is that Uber and Transplace is not really profitable for them to go out and sell and try to capture this SMB market.
Yeah.
Right. That's a very hard thing to do. Everyone's tried to do that. It's hard to corner that market whatsoever, right? It's hard to make huge inroads and move the needle. Once you get so big, you need a ton of SMB shippers. But if you can tap other brokers to get a little bit of margin, right? Take a cut of all this, then there's very little competition in that, right? You're just kind of like taxing your network, right? And kind of your technology to make it easier to do. So if you're a smaller broker, 3-4 person operation, or even 10 person, sometimes, for certain markets, especially selling into markets that you don't really have a lot of capacity for, or if you just want to be a sales organization and kind of have that as your operations back and focus in on sales, it might make sense. You can't really scale that model though, right? If you're a broker using that service, it'd be hard to really scale. I mean, you can't become the next $100 million brokerage, right? But you can make a living doing that. Nice living, probably, right? So there's pros and cons to it all.
Oh, definitely. I definitely see the pros and cons, and I think that obviously the terminology used and how it's used is going to be the biggest play. If brokers are telling their customers where they're utilizing it properly, I think there's no problem. My personal opinion is just go out there and find your own capacity. You don't need to utilize Uber Freight for that. And in those times where you do need a legitimate co-broker situation, they are there, and there's other options out there, right? I mean, if you're I can think of several off the top of my head, but if you're a broker who's not good at expedited freight, call an expedited specific broker and co-broker loads. That's a way I think that it can be utilized really well. especially or if you have no experience or don't have a big flatbed division, but a broker who just specializes in flatbed, that's a great time to utilize, those co-broker agreements to help keep everything kind of more in-house for your customers. But I think if you can't find just traditional capacity for your normal loads aside from the specialized stuff, there's plenty of other brokers who can, in my opinion.
There is. There is. I mean, if you're a broker, you need to have your capacity.
Yeah.
Your own capacity. You have to own that, right? To really be a broker. Though, if I was going to start a brokerage, I'd consider doing.
For sure.
The
not
Uber
a bad
model,
option.
right?
Yeah.
It's not. If you want to keep it small, right? You think. I mean, I'll do the case for it again. Because it is somewhat interesting. It's like all the carriers out. You don't have to hire a carrier sales department. You don't have to, you can automate a few things.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you're not gonna massively grow doing that. But if it might have its time and place.
For sure.
For certain segments of the market. Is it better to have your own capacity and own your own book from beginning to end? Yes, it is. It is. So, but
there's always that option.
There's always that. Oh, well, let's compare that to the convoy model. Where explain that, because I'll screw it up if I explain it.
Yeah. So as far as I know, and I'm gonna just kind of do my quick research because I know Flexport changed.
Yeah, Flexport bought Convoy's technology. I think it's still branded Convoy to Go.
Yeah, so it is still branded as Convoy.
Yeah, it's still branded as Convoy. I know that they are very high on it. Drieger's, he was at F3 this week, and I talked to him a few months ago, right at the launch actually, and they're very high on it. I met a few of the Flexport guys at the Broker Carrier Summit a couple weeks ago, and I think it's you're almost using it as a load board or a capacity sourcing tool in a lot of ways. Is that
that's
kind of accurate?
No, for sure. And I did just a quick refresher on it, and I mean it's very similar to what Uber just released. I mean, from my press release I have here, it's Convoy platform is comprised of an AI powered marketplace aggregating a large reliable pool of carrier owner ops into a common platform with automated end-to-end load management, giving brokers access to a unique pool of capacity that is highly flexible, blah, 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 as the brokers can use the platform to maximize effectiveness. So yeah, I mean, it seems like they're both very similar in terms of kind of the like AI load matching and allowing brokers to access capacity that they really didn't have access to before. And I think that I don't really have a problem with that traditionally. I just, like I said, I think that if you're going to go out and start a brokerage and really start a brokerage, you just have to own your capacity.
Yeah, I think that's the best the best in class, right? You own your own capacity.
And there's always, like I said, I can see always, like from your perspective, playing devil's advocate, there can be a need for a specialization in, maybe there's a small broker who's got 4 or 5 customers that he moves stuff for, and they just love him and don't really care about using the same carriers all the time. And there's, I mean, I know brokers like that who just have 4 or 5 really loyal customers. They give him 25 loads a week, and they've got a couple of carriers who could do it. And you could very easily leave an agency or leave your brokers, go start something small, use these platforms, Uber and Convoy, to cover your loads, and it becomes a little bit easier to do things. But if you're going to do it like kind of on the larger, like you said, if you're going to try to scale to a very large brokerage, you just have to have your own capacity. But doing it on a small scale, you could totally do it.
Right. The other thing I think that's interesting, or that's like a big theme, would love to hear what you guys are thinking about, is like the fraud aspect of this. Is Uber or Convoy a safer place to procure capacity than, DAT. Maybe you were getting guff from the carrier that was hauling the stinky garlic, and I don't know, maybe the trailer wasn't as maybe it was 100 degrees and not 55 like you said it was. I don't know. That's an interesting piece of it. Highway was just named the #1 freight tech 25 company this year, and it seems like the more people use Highway, the more freight fraud there is in the market. And I don't know that the bad actors are going anywhere anytime soon. They're probably just changing their attack vectors and coming harder. So that's an interesting piece of it. And I feel like I saw online recently, and I couldn't find it. It's like, where is the load board freight going? I think there's been a relatively precipitous drop off in overall
20%.
Freight volume moved on 20%, right, Kev?
That's what I heard. That's what I think I heard. Let's put it that way. My memories.
Yeah, I heard something
so my
similar
memory's
to that
not
as well.
It used to be.
That was 20%. A number I was going to throw out. So I mean,
so.
There's at least some anecdotal corroboration, but it's interesting to see the freight moving away from those places that.
But that's a good point too, right? I'll go back to the Uber and Convoy. What's the difference between that and load boards?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's fair.
You're tapping someone else's capacity.
And to Casey's point, I mean, is this capacity any safer than DAT capacity or just regular load board capacity? I don't know, but if Uber Freight trusts them, they're in their network, they're one of the largest, out there. So maybe it's a little bit safer. I don't know.
I'm not sure if Uber's a Highway customer, but
I think that's for both of those platforms. I think that is one of their big selling points, actually.
Yeah.
Now, but it's one of the big selling points is they've been vetted through those brokerages and former brokerages, and the fraud has been limited.
Yeah.
And I think they're using tools like maybe Highway to vet all those carriers, right? And supplementary tools on top of that to do that. So, so I think that's where they're really competing against the load boards is that safety part of it.
Yeah.
Or vetting.
Yeah, the vetting aspect for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, top 25 came out. What was that today? Was that this morning or was that yesterday?
I think it was this morning.
Yeah, Highway #1. Phenomenal job. Just phenomenal job over there. Q'd #6.
Yeah, got Flexport at 7.
Yeah, we had Prasad on here a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe.
Nice.
And so congrats to Prasad and Tom Curry. Amazing job that they're doing over there. It's their first time to really be entered into it, I think.
Wow, that's awesome.
Unbelievable finish for them. I saw a post from Gavin Vaughter. I think you're right, Kev. They launched less than a year ago, and I think they've got almost 100 logos already.
Same with Cargado. They launched less than a year ago as well, and they're 10th.
Yeah, I think they're just coming out of beta or just coming really live right now.
Yep.
So they're I think everything because I was on a panel with Matt Silver at Broker Carrier Summit, and we're talking, and they're just moving people from beta to the full blown logos or customers, right? So they're in that process still. So yeah, that's they were number 10.
Yep.
Which is amazing. And then there's some others here.
Right ahead of JB Hunt at 11.
Yeah.
JB Hunt at 11. Denim made it on here, which is great.
Yeah.
Green Screens. I think they were number 5. Yeah, number 5 last year, number 5 this year. They're doing a great job over there.
Yeah, they are.
Amazon Freight, which is, I know they're a behemoth, but I don't hear too much about them.
I don't either.
With Relay and everything.
I hear about a lot of Relay scams, but aside from that, I don't hear much.
Yeah, I think that's another competitive angle for Uber and Flexport. I hear the same thing. I hear there's a couple there's a couple entities out there that people source loads from now that are the largest contributors by far for fraud. And I heard that not too long ago from someone who runs, let's just say, a $500 million or more freight brokerage.
Wow.
So,
wait,
yeah,
where did you say that?
A few.
Where's that coming from again?
What
were you saying? Where you mentioning
where I heard
that
it
was coming from?
The president of a
No, not the source, but where's the bad capacity coming from?
well, a couple entities. I won't say who those entities are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I will say that there's some names being spoken of around the industry.
I'm sure.
A lot of allegations being thrown.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the first time either.
No, not the first time. But yeah, so that's probably another point on there, and I think as time will go on, I know you talk about digital brokers. I think there's a few others out there that are pivoting to kind of the tools for brokers, right?
Yeah,
tools for brokers. Yeah, Transfix definitely, right? They sold the brokerage to NFI, and that's what they're focused on. And yeah, you have to do the SaaS multiples, right? The freight brokerage multiples won't get you there, and
that's true.
It's true, and it's something that Convoy wasn't able to pivot to in time. They got hit by a bad market, and they hadn't pivoted quick enough to Convoy for brokers, right?
Right.
Those kind of what they're launching whenever all the shit happened with film. So yeah, it's strange. This some, but yeah. So like top 25 came out today. Any surprises in there that anyone?
I wouldn't say surprised. I'm to see Aurora in there, Aurora Technologies for their self-driving autonomous vehicle trucks. I'm just a little shocked that maybe they weren't in there sooner with some of their tech, but it's, I guess, good to see them in there. Congrats to like One Rail and Parade. It's awesome to see them in there.
One Rail just raised another $43 million today. I saw.
Yeah, I saw that this.
Did they really?
Yeah, I saw that this morning as well.
Four Kites in there as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. I guess, what does that mean? They stayed the same? There were 12 last year.
Yeah, they stayed the same rank.
Yep.
Haven't heard nearly as much about the visibility space.
No, they were. We heard a lot about them for a long time, and then it just. I guess I don't know if the hype around them died down, or they're just a little bit more quiet on social media than they were, a year or two ago. But yeah, I agree. I haven't heard as much, from that aspect of it, or just anyone in that, or anyone in that space. Four Kites.
Four Kites.
Or just the overall visibility space, aside from like the double brokering, tracking, and stuff like that style.
Yeah.
The Four Kites style visibility, I haven't heard as much from over the last, year or so.
Well, there's a surprise right there, right? We're talking about Four Kites. In case I missed it here, I don't see Project 44 on here.
No.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, and that would be certainly the first year that I can remember that they haven't been up there. If not, I think they're number one at least one of those years. But top three and
Unicorn.
Yeah.
Unicorn. Yeah, and
space is valued too high for any of these companies to ever have a chance at being successful, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You raise money at that valuation at the peak of the cycle there.
Yeah.
It makes things really tough.
Yeah, I think unicorns, billion-dollar companies that just don't really exist in this space. I think Samsara maybe, right?
Right. That's the
Yeah,
other
I mean,
piece.
to touch on that, we see, Flexport at number 7, to touch on those valuations. Do we think that in 2022 that they were actually worth $8 billion?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, no. I mean,
that's my thought,
yeah, no.
Those
no.
valuations were just during peak COVID were just absolutely insane on these tech and freight companies.
They're completely insane, and Flexport, I think it was 2019, right? By the time I got to
Yeah.
FreightWaves, that was right at the time, almost within a month of them raising $1 billion from SoftBank.
Yep.
Does anyone think that $1 billion in one investment in freight tech, no matter what it is wise?
Let's
Not really.
Let's find $1 billion to put into freight media, and we'll find out.
Exactly right. Yeah, ThinkFreight. Just go raise. Go raise $1 billion, and then let's find out.
Billionaires, if you're listening, companies, if you're listening, we are taking money. We may buy ThinkFreight may buy an island, and you may never see us again. But we are raising money. Just totally kidding.
Oh, right.
It'll be the first time a freight tech founder tried something shady.
I'll.
Yeah.
There's some crazy stories back in the day, man. There was slang.
Oh, yeah.
There was. I mean, what happened to Nikola? I mean, I still see them around.
Yeah, Nikola. Yeah.
Yep.
Still alive.
Slink was fascinating.
Yeah, it was very fascinating.
It was very fascinating. It was,
Chris Kirshner.
Yeah, doing 25 years.
Yep.
22, and Clarissa wrote the stories about it, and I talked to her about it because I was around this time, and then we had a friend, that left and went over there and worked there for a couple of months, never got paid.
Wow.
From FreightWaves, right?
We were talking about him earlier.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, and yeah, and just the whole arrogance of it all. I mean, so you raised $40 million or $20 million, whatever. I don't know the exact numbers, but it was somewhere out there, right? The latest round. You had $250 million valuation, and you think that you can just wire the money to yourself and start buying cars and golf memberships. I forget, what, $100,000 for a golf membership.
I think he tried to buy.
Guys tried to buy an English Premier, or not a Premier League, but a English Championship League, whatever.
Yeah.
Football team, right?
Yeah.
And you're not going to get caught. I mean, what? And then you don't pay your employees.
Yeah,
I still to this day don't understand why someone would do that, right?
You get to be that smart, and then you make very unsmart decisions like that. It's very interesting.
You know what? And I had never met Chris Kirshner, so I don't know him at all. But I do think 3 years before he started Slink with other guys, he was selling TVs at Best Buy. So there's probably something in there, right? He wants it all right now, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I raised all this money for this company. I want my money right now.
It's my money. It's
my money. Yeah. Yeah. He had a private jet that could, I forget the class of it, but it could fly to Europe nonstop. I mean, it's a little crazy.
It's absurd.
It's a little crazy. So anyway, I'll give it off my tangent of Slink, but I just find it fascinating.
Huh? No, it's very fascinating. No, it's very fascinating, man. It's a good tangent to go on.
I think he, it's just crazy things like trying to buy a Premier, like you could, and they can never match the funds. He could never confirm his funds because he was playing this show game. I think he bought a black Ferrari, but he wanted a red one, so he painted it red. I mean, just crazy stuff.
Money does that. Money does funny things to people, man.
It,
See
it,
that
it
much
does.
of it.
It does. It puts you in a federal prison for 25 years too.
It sure does.
So be careful. But yes, Link, you had a lot of companies raising money, and we always talk about it. Crypto, or not crypto, but blockchain.
Yep.
How many companies Casey ran into that raised millions just saying blockchain.
Yeah, a lot of them. It's crazy. I was just doing some cleaning, some housekeeping, and came across that book, The Promise of the Blockchain. I don't know if you remember that one, Kev, but
yeah, I do.
No, certainly interesting. The other thing that I saw this week, which I thought was interesting, and I haven't thought too much further about it, is I think David Bell launched a new company. So he's the lean staffing guy, and then I see CloneOps AI come out this week. An AI virtual agent version of the offshore brokerage model is kind of what it seems like.
That's interesting.
I imagine it probably is. Yeah. I think that has grown. What he did a few years ago by offshoring. I mean, that's just grown exponentially. And not only in market size or created a new market out of it, but also the competitive. And now one of the main competitors is AI. Probably the main competitor to the whole group of offshore staffing is AI. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to that.
Right. Yeah. That was a company, Lean Staffing, that had all the high-end sponsorships across the industry events a couple of years ago, and
I think they still do. I still see them at a lot of different events and headlining. I think F3 they're a headliner maybe. Yeah,
they're still everywhere for sure.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how this new AI revolution in freight brokerage really takes over, because there's so many companies who are doing kind of these AI staffing style with Happy Robot and now CloneOps. There's a lot who are, I think, going to come out.
FleetWorks.
Yeah, and FleetWorks and
yep.
lots of companies out there that are just starting to dip their toes into it and see how they can help scale operations and without having to involve more of that human element, which is interesting. I mean, I think that it can definitely take a really heavy lift off of a freight broker. If you're spending a lot of your time covering loads and you can utilize this AI to not have to cover as many loads or take as many calls on that load, and only get the ones that are really advantageous to the details. I think that it can definitely be a really, really unique play.
You got to have the capacity, right?
What's that?
You got to have the capacity, right? And
got to have the capacity.
Those tools really give you the ability to, handle more freight as a rep, right? I think the rep of tomorrow will have to handle 100 loads a day to, make sense for some of these organizations. Or at least it seems like that's where things are trending, right? And
I've seen demos of the inbound carrier calls that some of the AI assistants can do, and it's impressive.
It's really impressive, because that's the biggest bottleneck, right? Like, you've got, I don't know, what 80% of the freight comes from like less than 20% of the shippers, right? So like, you've got so many more trucks to try and fill this capacity. A lot of that stuff's coming via phone. You're probably getting some of these loads tendered via email from the customer, and then you've got to figure out. It's just massive bottleneck from being able to go and get more freight from more customers. And if your job is to, you know, sell trucks for your customers, move freight, then these tools, I think, make a lot of sense and make drivers' lives easier too, maybe at the end of the day.
I wouldn't be surprised too. Well, I wouldn't be, you know, you have the AI tools, right? We're talking about AI assistants right now. We're talking about AI back office, right? And any of the pure play AI kind of tools that gain some traction, right? I think, and this goes back to, we were talking about this with Grace last week, is that I see someone coming in and multiple players consolidating, right? Buying tools, right? Because they're tools and features and products that give someone with a suite of services another competitive advantage, right? Or another product line to offer and to integrate in with what they're doing right now to have more of a one, you know, all-in-one solution. And I think there'll be a couple players out there trying to do that. I think it's inevitable with both AI and just a lot of other really cool tech that's out there, but it's hard to be standalone in the long term, right? You kind of, you have to have multiple products or sell to somebody with multiple products at some point. And I think you'll probably see some consolidation,
Right.
and people buying things to complement what they're already doing, right? And I think you're seeing that with staffing companies complementing AI, integrating AI into the staffing and making it kind of where you go, no matter if you need an AI solution or a person issue, that's where you're going to go. And that's going to win out. Those options are going to win out over just being a pure play of one or the either, right? So I think and you know, it's hard to raise money right now. Who knows when that will turn? And you know, runways are runways. They end at some point.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Thomas? Have you thought at all about like what the next wave of freight tech will look like? And, you know, if somebody can establish some network effect, build a trucker tools that has, you know, all 2.5 million carriers on it, or, you know, get yourself to the network effect that a DAT or somebody like that has. It is interesting. Kevin and I have talked about like the place I have about the trucking aspect of it. Like, how could you provide all of the tools to owner operators that they need to operate, sleep, eat, stay healthy, route optimize, et cetera, et cetera. I think there are a couple other places that it could happen, but love your thoughts.
Before you answer, Thomas, Casey, I forgot I had a call at 2:30 today, my time. So I'm going to have a hop off here. Unfortunately, because I really want to hear your answer, I might hop back on if you guys are still here after the call. But I'll definitely tune in and watch the replay to hear this because I'm super interested in this, and I gotta go. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, Kevin. We'll catch you later, brother.
You bet. Take care.
See you, Kevin.
Yeah,